Hello, today is April 26, 2020. My name is Leslie Torres. I am interviewing Vanessa Hernandez for the University Library Special Collections and Archives at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, hereafter abbreviated as UTRGV. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Ms. Hernandez, that this interview will be placed in the University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV and shared with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there is anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there is something you want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. The University Library Special Collections and Archives will archive your interview, along with any other photographs and other documentation you are willing to share. UTRGV University Library will retain copyright or non-exclusive right to the interview and any other materials you donate to Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV. Because we are not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting to make sure you agree with our interview procedures before we continue. So, I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each question. Do you give University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV consent to archive your interview and your materials at the UTRGV University Library?
Yes, I agree.
Do you grant UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives right, title, and interest in copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
Yes, I agree.
Do you agree to allow UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Do you grant the University Library Special Collections and Archives consent to share your Zoom interview with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voices of a Pandemic Oral History mini project, which will include posting the interview on the internet?
Yes, I agree.
As you recall, we previously filled out a pre-interview form. We use information from the pre-interview form to help in research. The entire form is kept in a secure Voces server at the University of Texas at Austin. Before Voces sends it to UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives, we would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or family members, so that will not be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at UTRGV University Libraries. And the final 2 questions ask for your consent on what I just described. Do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file available to researchers at UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives?
Yes, I agree.
On occasion, UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and Voces receive requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers or your email with journalists?
Yes, I agree.
Thank you for your consent. Your experiences and stories mean a lot to us at UTRGV Special Collections and Archives. I look forward to what you say in the interview questions I will now ask. So, Vanessa, thank you for your time. Like I said earlier, your stories and experiences are valuable to us at UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and the Voces Project. Particularly for us at UTRGV Special Collections and Archives, we are committed to preserving the stories of Mexican Americans and Latinos from South Texas and the Rio Grande Valley, and those who work closely with these populations during this COVID-19 pandemic. Because you are a college student at Texas A&M who is currently studying abroad in South Korea, and because you are a daughter, sister, and friend who is knowledgeable of the ways COVID-19 has affected others in her inner circle, I know you have many meaningful stories and experiences to share on how COVID-19 has impacted these roles you carry out in your life. So, before I ask you to share stories about your life in this pandemic, tell us, who is Vanessa Hernandez?
Oh, well, I am, I'm a student who is currently doing something she's always wanted to do in the middle of a pandemic. So that is something, and yeah, that's about it.
Okay, so the first question I want to ask you is, when did you first hear about COVID-19? And how did you learn about it?
Okay, so I first heard about COVID-19 when I was preparing to study abroad in South Korea in the spring of 2019. 2019? Yes. Yeah. So, no, in the spring of 2020. So, while I was preparing to study abroad in South Korea, that's when I first heard about COVID, because when I was getting ready to depart, that was when the coronavirus started appearing in South Korea. Um, so obviously, since I was preparing to go to that country, I was keeping up to date with the news and what was going on in South Korea. So when I first started seeing that they had that they were experiencing the pandemic already, um, that was when I first heard about it, because I was getting ready to go, and then all of a sudden it was not possible because of this virus that nobody had heard about before. So that was it.
Okay. And how did you learn about it? Through radio, TV, social media?
I learned about it because I was keeping up with their news. So
Oh,
it was through, yeah, through their news outlets on the internet.
okay. And what was your first reaction to the information about COVID-19?
Oh, when I first heard about it, I thought, oh, great, I'm not going to be able to go on this experience that I've been working for like the past semester. So, and I thought it was just I thought it was how that it was just so crazy that out of all the times when I had like never traveled and had never been planning to travel, there's all of a sudden this virus. And I, right when I was getting ready to travel for the first time by myself in my life, it was like, oh no, just kidding, you can't go. So yeah.
At what point did you realize this pandemic was a serious life-altering event? Or do you not think it's serious, and why?
uh I think I first thought it was serious mm, when what well I guess after seeing how it affected Korea right when I was getting ready to go. But I think I didn't really get how serious it was until um it hit the US. So I remember when news about the coronavirus was first appearing in the US news, that people were rushing out to the grocery stores and buying up all the toilet paper and all the food. And obviously my family was concerned, and at the time we also went to the grocery stores because we were like, there's going to be no paper, there's going to be no food, what are we going to do? So I remember waking up around 4 a.m. to go to the nearest HEB, and to be able to get there right when they open. And it was crazy arriving and seeing everybody with carts like stacked up with like food and water and toilet paper, and us doing the same thing, like scrambling to find what few cans were still left. And I think that was when it really hit me that it was a big thing going on.
Okay,
Mhm.
definitely. And over the last few months, what news media, social media, or other sources do you rely on to keep you informed about coronavirus? Or I guess even also last year when it was at its peak.
I think my main source of like news was social media. I think social media is really quick on, keeping up with what's going on in the world. So I definitely used a lot of, I think recently I've used a lot more Twitter, but I think back then it was also, I guess a lot of like the news stations. I think back home when it was first appearing, my mom watches a lot of, you know, Noticias 48, Telemundo. So that was also a big source of information.
Okay. And Can you share with me what you understand about COVID-19 as an infectious disease and any of its variants? And likewise, can you share with me what you don't understand about this new coronavirus?
Yes, so from what I understand of coronavirus is that it is a quite contagious virus, and that in order to prevent, getting infected, would be to obviously will wear a mask, wash your hands, keep the social distance. And I think from what I don't understand is um, how, I guess, how some people, mm, well, I don't think there's not, I guess just now with the new variants, don't understand the, the, like the differences, but I do get that they are dangerous because as more people do not take these precautions to protect themselves from the virus, it just helps these variants come out. So,
Okay. Can you tell me what you know about the various vaccines available to the public and how do you feel about these vaccines?
yes, so I know at the moment there's three major vaccines in the US. I know that they each have a different, like set of like symptoms and their rate, the percentage of, their protection and like the dosage, quantities. Mm. And how I feel about the vaccines is that I think a lot of people share the concern that that they think these vaccines came out too quickly, and that, it's still too soon to be vaccinating, which I understand these concerns because it is, you know, it's a big change, I think, from having nothing to all of a sudden, right? You have the solution, which I guess will works hand in hand with other things, but at the same time, uh today back then we didn't have the technology and the urgency, right, in that we do in this pandemic, so that makes a difference too.
And do you have a vaccination story you would like to share with me now or perhaps later in this interview?
At the moment I don't have a vaccinating story. uh yeah, I'm currently in my situation, there's no vaccine.
And do your family members hold the same beliefs as you about COVID-19, or are there some who take it more seriously or lightly?
My immediate family members, we all share the same opinion. So we, right from the very beginning, we did do the mask wearing, the hand washing, and the social distancing.
Okay. And for these next set of questions, I'd like to talk about how you've seen COVID-19 affect family members, friends, and yourself. So first, can you share with me in general how many members are in your family and who are they to you?
Yes. So in my immediate family, I have my mother, my father, my oldest sister, my older brother, me, and then my little sister.
Okay. And since you're a college student at Texas A&M, can you tell me at what point you returned home during the pandemic?
Yes. So actually, when I returned home from A&M, it was fall of 2019, because at the end of fall 2019, because since I was supposed to go study abroad the spring of 2020, um, I had I didn't return to A&M for that semester because uh yes. So I didn't have to leave Texas A&M because of COVID. I had left it because I was going to be studying abroad and I was not going to be there for the spring semester.
Okay. And
Hmm.
I know it was just to come back for the winter break, but can you share with me your return trip home to the Valley? And how did you feel? How did you get home? And what did you notice was different about this trip back home, if anything?
Well, so when I was returning home, there was still no news of COVID. COVID did not exist at the time. So for me returning home, it was not a big difference. It was obviously, I was feeling like, wow, like when I come back from studying abroad, this is going to be a big difference. But I did not end up studying abroad that semester. So yeah.
And I know you mentioned this earlier. So what was your immediate family's reaction to COVID, and how did you pass the time during the stay-at-home period of last March and April of 2020?
Mm. So my immediate family, they were concerned more so because at the time I was going to be leaving to a country that was foreseeing the effects of COVID. So for them that was concerning. And but I think keeping up to date with the news in Korea was what really, I think, prepared us for what was happening, like for it to when it reached the US. And so yeah, it was concerning and we did the best that we could at the time.
Okay.
Mhm.
And did you all continue to quarantine after March and April of 2020, and why or why not?
Yes, we did. We did stay home and we didn't go out unless we needed to. Groceries, we started using the delivery from like Walmart, HEB, curbside pickup when that became available.
Okay.
Mhm.
And did your family change the way you socialized when you went out in public? And if so, how so?
Yes, so if we went out in public, it was just if we needed to pick up things that we couldn't get delivered. And when we did go out, we wore masks. We used hand sanitizer quite frequently in the stores or and yeah, if we didn't need to go out, we didn't. We did not. It's been a long time since my family and I have eaten out at a restaurant. We have not done that to this day.
Okay. And how many semesters were you at College Station before you came home in 2019?
So I had been at College Station for 3 semesters.
Okay, so what was it like quarantining at home after being used to living away at College Station for 3 semesters? And how did you readjust to living at home after having the freedom of a college student living in the dorms or living in a college town?
So I think it was tough just because, ooh, like once you live on your own, you kind of get used to doing things on your own schedule and when you want to. And so I think going back home, having to, readjust to living under somebody else's rules, and I think that was the biggest issue.
Okay.
Mhm.
And can you share with me how your family supported your studies while you were at home?
Yes. So, my parents, they knew like if I had classes from set time to set time, they would not interrupt me if I was in class, and they were very good at keeping that space. And when I had, papers to do or homework to turn in, they were very understanding of me having to say, I can't do this, I have to go work on this. And so that was good.
Okay, so on that note, did you ever feel learning from home amongst family was ever difficult? And if so, why or why not?
Yes, so I did think it was difficult at times when I needed to. I think I found it most difficult staying um up to date with assignments and things like that, just because I felt like since I was at home, I think because I was home and I hadn't been home in a while, it really made me feel like my priority being home was my family and not so much, getting that paper done. Or so I think that was the biggest issue, that I prioritized, you know, well, being home with my family, which was nice, right? And not having to really think of school. So I think was a thing that I wasn't thinking of school.
Mm.
Mhm.
Okay. And how did the pandemic impact family traditions, customs, and holiday celebrations? For example, did you celebrate birthdays and Christmas differently? Did you have a traditional Thanksgiving, or did you celebrate it a different way during this pandemic?
Yes, holidays definitely changed. For I remember, right when the pandemic was starting, my mom's birthday was in April, so that that was tough. Just because we always, my family, we would always get together for birthdays, and we'd throw, big parties and stay up all night. So that was way different because coronavirus was just picking up in the US. In my immediate family, we all shared the same concerns. We did not get together that day for my mom's birthday. It was just, we all were on Zoom, FaceTime, and that was it. And it was a weird thing that we weren't all in the same place. So mhm.
Mhm. If you attended any weddings, graduations, or funerals, can you please share with me how the pandemic made these events different from pre-pandemic times?
Mm.
You did.
So I did not attend any of those events during the pandemic. So I don't have any opinions because, like I said, if we didn't have to go out, we didn't. And that was something we weren't going to, be putting ourselves into that situation if it wasn't necessary.
Okay. And did your immediate family avoid visiting with family from out of town or even nearby family?
Yes, we did. We have not gotten together with with like cousins who live in Edinburgh, live in the valley since the pandemic. So, like, to this day, we still have not gone over or had them over. So, mm,
Okay. And in our pre-interview, you mentioned that your aunt contracted COVID-19. And can you explain how you and your family felt or reacted, and how is she doing?
mm. Yeah. So when my aunt got COVID, that was, I think, a very like okay, like now it's not a friend of a friend, now it's not so and so's uncle, now it's not like my friend, right now it's like a family member. And I think that was what really kind of made this whole pandemic more like you're really going through it, right? Because it's like you can get it, it doesn't matter who you are. And so yeah, she's doing okay, she's good now.
Okay, that's good. And
Mhm.
can you share what your family thought when you told them you were going to study abroad in South Korea during this ongoing global pandemic for this spring semester? And did this take a lot of convincing?
Mm. So I think definitely when COVID first started appearing in South Korea and when I was about to leave, that was a very big concern just because at that time we didn't know anything about it. It hadn't even reached the US at the time. So that was a very difficult time just because it wasn't just my parents who I had to consider. It was also like, am I really going to go through with this, right? And so at that time, I ended up deciding not to go. That was my decision hours before my flight took off. That same day, I said no. So, that was a big relief for my family. I think at the moment I was very upset with the whole situation, uh, but I think because of that, my parents were very supportive of this this spring semester, just because they knew I had been preparing it for a long time. They knew how much I really wanted to go, and because at this time, we knew more about COVID, we knew more about the virus, we knew what you have to do to keep yourself safe, and so and it was still a bit of a it wasn't so difficult to get my parents' approval. They supported what I wanted to do. They were like, if this is what you want, go for it. it's like you'll be okay, right? And I was like, yeah. So that was that.
So now I would like to ask you about your international travel and university experiences as an exchange student in South Korea, since you are, as we speak, studying abroad in South Korea. So first, is this your first overseas trip for study?
So the first time I went abroad was in my freshman year of college, but that was just for a week with a group of students and professors. So uh I'd say this is my first time on my own going abroad, and it's quite far away from the US. So yeah, traveling during a pandemic is definitely way different than traveling not in a pandemic. But yeah, that's
Well, on that note, when was your flight to South Korea, and how do you think COVID-19 affected this mode of travel?
so my flight to South Korea was February 25th, and I arrived in South Korea February 26th of this year. And that was very different. It was the longest flight I had ever been on. And I think that was definitely, I think studying abroad this semester, my biggest concern was the flight, just because it was a 15-hour flight and you're in there the entire time. So it's like, I think that was my biggest concern. Like I remember thinking, if I get COVID, it's because of the plane, right? Because everybody's in the same space, and yes, you had your masks on, but they'd still serve you food, and it's like either you eat or you don't, right? So yeah, yeah, totally different.
So, did you notice a difference in social distancing, mask wearing, or other precautions in different airports? And if so, in what ways?
Yes, so departing from the McAllen International Airport and to the Dallas International Airport, there was masks were required on the plane. You could not take it off unless you were eating, and even if you were eating, they would tell you, okay, if you can put the food in your mouth and then put your mask back up and chew and eat, and then you just take it down, put more food, and so mask wearing was definitely emphasized. Well, it was required. You couldn't get on that plane without a mask. So, and they did do temperature checks before getting on the international flight from Dallas to Korea at the Dallas airport. Before you would go on, they had this little temperature reader, and it would read your temperature before going on. So, and they did require a negative COVID test dated 72 hours before your flight. So that was new too.
And that COVID test before the McAllen or before the Dallas flight?
You needed that for the McAllen and the Dallas flight. Mm-hmm. And you needed it for the South Korea once arriving in South Korea.
So was it like 3 different tests, or could you show the same results by the time you got to South Korea?
It could be the same result.
Okay. So what city did you land in at South Korea, and did you have to take another COVID test or quarantine once you arrived?
Yes. So, um, can you repeat the question?
What city did you land in at South Korea, and did you have to take another COVID test or quarantine once you arrived?
Yeah. So, okay, I arrived in Incheon, South Korea, and I arrived at the Incheon International Airport. And so, upon my arrival, I knew beforehand that I was going to have to go through the COVID section before you're allowed into the airport. So I knew there they would check your temperature and check your COVID test. So when I arrived, well, for starters, I had not slept well. It was a very uncomfortable 15-hour flight. And I had a lot of layers on because it was going to be cold when I arrived in Korea. So when they checked my temperature, it was a little higher than normal, which you could imagine how scary that was when they put a tag on me and told me to follow this guy to this area. And I was like, okay. Um, so yeah, so now it's like I'm at the airport, but now my temperature is high and I don't know what to do. So they started asking me all these questions, like if I had, a fever. No, not if I had a fever. If I had like been in contact with somebody who had COVID, and it was like, no, I did not. And I wasn't the only one. They had a few other passengers that they had also in that little area in the airport. And so so ultimately I had to let the advisor from the university in Korea know what was going on. And then they told me, the airport officials, they were like, oh, we're going to have to COVID test you because your temperature is not going down. So you're going to have to stay here until your results come out. And I was like stay here, but I have to go, right? I'm like, the university here is going to pick me up. And they were like, well, because I had arrived at 5 p.m., the results for the COVID test were not going to come out until like 6 to 8 hours. There was no way that I could stay and leave. So um yeah, that was that. I had to stay there until my COVID results came out.
And can you share with me the process of getting tested for COVID in South Korea?
Yes. So here I remember, after they pulled me aside, they made me change masks. And that was the most uncomfortable mask I had ever worn. I don't even know where they got those. But so after that, they took me to this little waiting area, and then they called me over and they were like, okay, now follow me. And so I'm like following them, and we go into this elevator that goes down and then outside. So they tested the passengers whose like fever were like a little higher than normal outside of the airport. So you weren't even in the building. So they take you outside to the back, and then they sit you down on the little stool, and they're all wearing like hazmat suits. And so yes, it looked like a movie, honestly. And so I sit down, and they did the nose COVID test and the one that they, with the throat. So they did both. And after that, they were like, okay, you can go. And it was like, okay, well, not go, but you could go back to the little waiting area. So yeah, so that was interesting that they didn't do one test, they did two. And so they had me waiting in this little waiting area, and then I thought I was gonna have to sleep there. It was like a bench, but then they come back and they bring me food, and then they're like you're gonna go to the airport hotel afterwards. And I was like, okay. The airport, they should not call it hotel because it was more like a facility, which was strange because they take you to this. Oh, and so they don't take you out until they close the airport. So when you leave, it's when everybody else already left, right? So they really did, minimize the contact with, you know, people whose temperatures were higher. And yeah, so after they took us out from the little room, we went to the government facility, and they put us all in this little like shuttle bus, and then they drove us there. And the facility was interesting. It was like, I remember reading the signs, and it said something like airtight something. And so it was like, because of the way that the air flows to like, minimize the contamination. And they would stick you in these rooms that that had, your necessities. It had a restroom and a shower and what you would need. I do remember that area, like before going into, well, no, the whole space, that whole building was really warm, like really warm. And yeah, so I stayed there. My results came out around like 2 a.m. And they gave me the option. They came out negative, luckily. So they gave me the option of leaving then and there or waiting until 6 a.m. and they could drop me off at the airport. And I said the 6 a.m. option because it was 2 a.m. and it was my first time in Korea and I had nowhere to go. and the school was not going to pick me up at 2 a.m. So, and yeah, so then I went back to the airport the next morning, and then that's when I got picked up.
Okay. And
Mhm.
can you share with so when you got to the university, did you quarantine?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you share with me what quarantining in South Korea was like, and how did you get food and other domestic items while under quarantine?
Yes. So I did quarantine at the university when um, I was out of that government facility. And the process of quarantining here was the university had a dormitory sectioned off for quarantine. And so we were in the dorm rooms for 2 weeks. So we could not leave the rooms. And um, I remember before coming here, our advisor told us to pack our necessities that we would need because we would not be allowed to leave those rooms. So I came prepared with toothpaste, toilet paper, um, shampoo, body wash, all those things. So I didn't need any of that luckily when I arrived. But as for food, the university had given us the option of purchasing a meal plan before arriving for these 2 weeks. So that is what I did. I purchased the meal plan. So they would bring me breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the 2 weeks I was here. So I didn't have to worry about food. And I remember that the advisor told us that if we did need toilet paper or anything, to let them know that they would go out and purchase it for us and deliver it outside of our door. So I remember when it was like mealtime, they would just come knock on our door and like leave it and then leave. So then you would just go up, open your door, pick it up, bring it in, and that was how that was.
Okay. And
Mhm.
so, what are some of the major differences you've noticed about the way South Korea is handling this pandemic versus Texas and the Rio Grande Valley?
I think I think South Korea handled it better in the sense that they really, like, right when it occurred in their country, they right away shut everything down, and they, minimized the, a bunch like of people in one place. Like, um I know that they implemented a lot of like temperature checking in all the public areas before you go in. South Korea, the South Korean government did this thing where if you go anywhere, you need to have a code, and this code you scan it before you enter anywhere. So that's like your own personal, like, who you are code. And so if there's a case that occurred in I don't know, like a shop around in Korea, they will notify whoever was in that shop at that day at that time that there was a person who had COVID. So then those people would know right away, and so they would know to go get tested, or so I think that's something that Korea has done differently compared to the US, well, Texas and the Valley. And another thing is that they implemented a rule of no more than 4 people in, like if you're going out with friends, if there's more than four, you will not be allowed into a lot of restaurants, a lot of, you know, smaller areas. And so that is something that they still implement today. Like if you go out with a big group to a restaurant, they will tell you to separate, or they just won't let you in. So, mhm,
That's interesting. Um,
mhm.
so, right now, are you still in the quarantine wing of the dormitory, or how has your living situation changed, and are you living alone?
So currently, the dormitory is now just like a regular dormitory. There were students that arrived after I did who were still quarantining in another hall of the dormitory. So, but right now we each the dormitory is composed of a suite, and in each suite there is a common living area, and there are 6 individual rooms, and in those 6 rooms, there's 2 people per room. So currently, we all have a roommate, and we share for so six girls will share one bath and one restroom, and there's 6 girls who will share the second restroom and shower. So that is the current living situation.
And what has it been like living with other student exchange students from other countries?
So that has been very interesting just because we all have different cultures, it's languages. I walk everywhere around here, and there's some people speaking, Mandarin, there's others speaking Korean. Like it's a blend of a whole bunch of different cultures, and it's been interesting to see that.
Okay. And what nationalities are the other students you study with at this time?
So currently there are a few students from the US. There's uh, quite a few students from China. There's a few, there's a bunch from Uzbekistan. There are a few from Italy, and then a few from France, I believe.
Okay. And have you had to deal with serious language barriers, or are there a good amount of people who know English, or can you get by with beginner level of the Korean language?
Mm, I think the toughest language barrier, there's definitely a language barrier. I think I should have studied way more Korean before I arrived, because at the airport, having to deal with the whole, separation and quarantining and government facility, that was tough. I had no idea what they were saying, and they couldn't understand me. So the language barrier is real. Mhm.
So, did you have to speak with a translator, at least like in the airport situation?
No, luckily they brought over another airport official who she spoke English, so she understood me, and she was able to translate for the other Korean officials who did not speak English. So that was nice.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, okay. So, do you and the other students talk about the pandemic or share stories about how COVID is affecting your home countries or hometowns?
Yes, we do. I think because we all share that whole like traveling in the middle of a pandemic thing, we can relate on that and all the issues we had to face. Like, I've spoken to a few other students who had issues when they were trying to arrive in Korea. There was a few others who also got detained at the airport and had to spend that one night in the Korean government facility. So, and we've talked about, how it's been for them in their countries, and the differences that their countries have taken, and how it affected, their them while they were there. So we do share a lot of that. I think it's, because the pandemic has been something that everybody can relate to. We all have different stories about what's happened because of it, and so it's definitely a big topic.
Um, have you visited other cities in South Korea, and what was that like in terms of either culture shock or COVID-19 precautions for traveling in South Korea?
So yes, I have been able to visit other cities in Korea, and it's just interesting to see how, like, well, for culture shock, definitely the well the well so Korea is a very homogenous country, and they don't have a lot of diversity. So, everywhere you go, it's a majority Korean. So if you're a foreigner and you look different, they will look at you. And so, they don't see people from different places, in a lot of areas. And in the town that I am in, it's a very small kind of countryside town. So if you go out anywhere, there's a lot of, older people, and they will look, and that has been a culture shock, just because back home I did not get people staring at me because I was not, a minority. So that has been something to get used to. And as for COVID, policies that they have, it's definitely that they are very, good at checking your temperatures. Here, everybody has a mask on, and there's never issues with people who don't have a mask on. And I think that's big, just because wearing a mask is, something that they've always done even before a pandemic. For them, it was a very common thing if you had a cold to put on a mask so you wouldn't give it to somebody else. And that's something that they've, that's in the Korean culture that they've always done. So that has been interesting to see that, well, back in Texas, back in the valley, there's people who don't want to wear their masks and they don't see why they should. And here you don't see anything like that. So that's interesting.
Like the commonly and readily accepted things in South Korea are controversial in the United States, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
Yeah.
and why did you select South Korea as a study abroad location during this global pandemic?
So I selected South Korea because it's a country that I've always wanted to visit. It's, ever since I was, I think, in high school, I became interested in South Korea and their culture and the language, and it was just, a very interesting and, I think unique area that I really wanted to visit one day. So, and I thought that I really wanted to be there longer than a week or two, right, for vacation. So when I saw this program that allowed me to study abroad in Korea for the entire spring semester, I thought I have to do this. So that's why I chose it.
Okay. And as a study abroad student, are you eligible for a vaccine in South Korea?
That is something I have not looked into, just because at the moment I think like if I were to get vaccinated, I'd want to do it back home. So I think there's that.
Okay. And I understand you want to become a journalist once you graduate. So, how has your study abroad experience in South Korea so far influenced your career aspirations?
So being in Korea, I think I've really enjoyed the the travel aspect of, well, traveling. So I think with journalism, I think being able to work in the area of travel, and being able to, document it, whether that be through photographs, through articles, through, a video format, I think that is something that is really interesting to be doing. So I think definitely probably travel journalism.
Okay. And what has been the most fulfilling or exciting part of your exchange experience so far?
So I think it's just been very, overall, it's been a very, fulfilling experience, just because this has been something that I've always wanted to do. And the fact that I was even able to do this in the middle of a pandemic is just, you know, it's great that it was able to happen. And I think just being able to take in like the culture and the differences that, I don't experience back home. It's all been very enriching, I think.
Okay. And this next set of questions focuses on your stories and experiences as a Texas A&M college student in the time of COVID-19. So in your view, how has your institution dealt, or home institution dealt with this pandemic? And what changes do you know of were made to learning, dorm life, sporting events, etc.?
Okay, so because I did not study at the university while I was, taking classes there, I don't know too much about what they did, since I wasn't on campus, but from what I have been hearing is that they did implement the mask wearing and the social distancing, and they did do that. So, mhm.
Okay. Um, to your knowledge, how long did you and other students have to do remote learning before your institution allowed students and faculty to return to the classrooms on campus?
So I know we did remote learning. The like I think all classes were remote learning right when the pandemic hit the US. So that spring semester, I remember my friend saying that they were having such a hard time with the online format. And at the time, I was not taking any classes because I was supposed to have gone to Korea for my study abroad. But because that was canceled in the middle of February, it was already too late for me to enroll in classes back at A&M. So that semester, I lost that semester because of the coronavirus pandemic. So I did not have to go through, you know, being like a college student. Well, not being a college student, but taking classes during the pandemic and changing to that online format. That was not something I had to deal with, but I did hear that it was difficult.
Okay.
Hmm.
Um, and you mentioned this earlier. So are masks mandatory when you are on campus, to your knowledge?
Yes, I believe they are.
Okay. And have you ever seen or heard of anti-mask sentiments by other Texas A&M students?
Uh, yes, I think heard, no, but I have read comments on social media about students who think wearing masks is not necessary and that it is an infringement of their like rights. So that you do see a bit on social media where there's some students who don't agree with having to wear a mask.
Yeah. I
Mm.
think I remember seeing last year too, a Twitter account posting all the Texas A&M students partying.
Yes, yes, that was a big issue.
There's a lot.
Hmm.
So at my institution, UTRGV, study abroad trips were canceled in 2021. Why do you think Texas A&M did not cancel their study abroad programs?
So I think Texas A&M didn't cancel their programs just because they are a university that's very big on study abroad. So they didn't cancel their programs, but they did have a more um, what's the word? Like, in order to, well, now you had to get your program approved, right? Before it was like, yeah, you were in, okay, you're good to go. Now I remember with this for the application process for the semester for the 2021 spring semester, I had to get the university to approve it. So it wasn't just the study abroad office. I had to get, I think it was like the dean or like the president of the university had to like sign off on it or something like that. So yeah, they didn't cancel a lot of programs. No, they canceled quite a few, but not all of them. Mm.
Okay. And so on that note, about canceling only a certain amount, do you know if your institution limited the countries to top performing nations handling the pandemic? So for example, can students still study abroad in China, Mexico, the UK, or Italy, to your knowledge?
Yeah, so I know at the beginning, the university came out with a list of like different countries, and they had them ranked from like extremely dangerous to like not. And I remember when I was getting ready to study abroad this semester, Korea was actually on like the like extremely dangerous rating, which was interesting because at the time Korea was handling the coronavirus pandemic way better than the US. So that was something. And I remember there was other countries too that like I believe at the time Spain was not considered extremely dangerous, yet I have a friend right now who was working on her application to go study abroad in Spain this summer, and she recently told me that she won't be able to because the Spanish government isn't allowing foreign like exchange students because of the pandemic, yet Korea did, even before this summer. So that's been interesting. I think it just depends on the country and like what their rules are.
Do you remember what was at the top of the list, like as in like the least dangerous to visit?
Oh, the least dangerous, probably mm, like the European countries, I think. So like, you know, Spain, like London, I think.
Mm,
Yeah, the UK. Mhm.
okay. And
And the most dangerous were the Asian countries.
mm,
Mm-hmm.
I see. So,
Mm-hmm.
what was your experience taking sorry. What was your
Mm-hmm.
experience taking remote college courses in the fall of 2020? Did you enjoy it or find this mode of learning more difficult?
Um, I honestly I liked it just because I was in the comfort of my own home. I was able to be with my family, which I would not have been able to do if I had to attend classes in person. So for me, um, I liked having online classes. Like I said, the only problem was that because I was home, I wasn't in like school mode, so I wasn't really, you know, you were like keeping up with like, well, I did keep up with my work and I did okay for that semester, but definitely it was more difficult to stay on top of everything. Mm.
And now to close, I'll ask you some final questions.
Hmm.
Are you satisfied with the local response to COVID-19 in Edinburgh and Hidalgo County?
I think when I was home, I thought they were doing the best that they could. But I think after coming to Korea and seeing how they've implemented their, rules and how they've handled it, I feel like, Texas and, the Hidalgo County could have done a bit more.
And well, on that note, are you satisfied with the state response to COVID-19 led by Texas and Governor Greg Abbott?
No, no, I think he could have done a lot better too. For one, the masks. I think masks should definitely still be worn.
Mhm.
So that's one thing. No, no, I don't think he did a good job.
And were you satisfied with the national response to COVID-19 in 2020 led by former President Donald Trump?
Mm, no, no, I think they could have done a lot more. Yeah, like I think they should have right away stopped everything and kept it that way for a while, but they didn't. So
So I know you've been in South Korea since February,
yes, February. Hmm.
but so far, are you satisfied with the current national response to COVID-19 led by President Joe Biden and his administration?
Oh, well, I guess since I haven't really been experiencing how they've been handling it this year, I don't have a lot to say. I feel like there's there hasn't been major changes really. So yeah, it's still
Okay. And if you had the power to respond to COVID-19 with policies, laws, or workplace decisions, what would you have done differently, if anything?
oh well, I think if anything, I would have, made masks mandatory for like ever until COVID really went away. Um and like I said, I think just being here in Korea, you really see how different their government handled it compared to, you know, our home government. So and so and you can see the difference in how contained they have it in Korea compared to the US. Of course, the US is a much larger country, but I think if they had followed some of the things that Korea did, it could have been maybe a bit better.
Like with the tracing of
Definitely. I think that makes a big difference because here it's like right away if they notice, if they're informed that there was a case in one place, they inform all the other people that were there. So it's like, like I think that if the US had implemented some sort of system like that, it could have helped contain the spread.
And last question, are there any other stories or experiences you would like to share with me that I have not asked about?
I think I'd just like to say that I think one of the biggest differences that is between Korea and the US in containing the virus is that like culturally as a society, I think Korea is more of a, how do you say it, like a more of like a united society, if that makes sense. They will do things as like a group. So like when the government mandated like the masks and like the you know like the no more than 4 people, they were very quick to act on that, right? And the no social distancing, the social distancing, like that, and like I think like here, like even right now, if you book an Airbnb to stay somewhere, the hosts will tell you you cannot have more than 4 because of their like no more than 4 people rule. So, and it's fine, like people will go with it and there's no issues with that. And I think back in the US, if somebody tells you you have to wear a mask, people will say no, that they don't want to because they don't want to be told what to do. So I think that is a very big thing, and I just wanted to mention that the individual, you know uh just like being your own like person and really wanting to do what you want to do, whereas in Korea it's more of like a group thing. It's a big difference, and I think that's just something that's important to mention in this whole situation.
Okay. Very
Mm-hmm.
important parting words.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time, Vanessa.
Yes, thank you for having me.
We appreciate your contribution.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.